Afternoon panel. I just wanted to ask the expert panel, I mean, there's some really interesting insights shared there. Nobody committed necessarily to any timescales or horizons, and I know we talked sort of broadly around use cases and different use cases, but I'd be interested from each of you, when do you think this technology is going to really have an impact within the industry, and what do you think that kind of killer use case might be?
Sure. So I guess from IBM's point of view, the technology is real, it's happening. Finance, fintech, insurance are leading the way. High-value engineering, aerospace, automotive, and so on is a little way behind that, and then construction will follow, and that is purely to do with the value proposition, I think, and also the fragmented nature of the industry. So we see a lot of interest from clients at the moment, but there's probably 3 to 5 years before we get to proper scale blockchain in construction.
Yeah, so at Clyde Co we have an in-house consultancy called Clyde Co, which is developing blockchain and smart contract solutions, predominantly in the insurance space. At the moment, we are talking to a range of our construction clients, and I agree, I think there's a lot of talk about blockchain in the construction industry, and I think that full rollout, usage, and uptake will be in that 3 to 5 year time span.
I personally think that construction will have blockchain done to it. So if you take some of the large information services providers to construction who have been consolidating at a very rapid rate, so if you think about Oracle's acquisition of Aconex, which I think was $1 billion worth, I think it's those organizations who will use blockchain within their systems that then construction accesses as a user. I'd be very surprised if any construction organization have access to the R&D funding to do it for themselves.
I know I kind of picture the kind of a slight sort of odd behavior of the construction industry and so on, but it actually does, as Simon said, actually well suited for us to actually utilize these technologies. But I think we're a way to go. I don't know about 3 to 5 years, but we actually really need to adopt our BIM process in the first instance. And I think we're actually still some way behind that. But certainly it's exciting. I have to say, I mean, I did give you some doom and gloom, but I'm really as excited as it comes on all of these things. But let's start one step at a time.
Hi, thank you very much. I missed about just over 50% of that, so apologies if this has already been covered. I am wondering, in IBM's case, if there is a specific token or coin that you're developing, either independently or whether you're leveraging off existing Ethereum contracts or whatever it is. If you can talk about that, I'm wondering if anyone sees any potential utility in convergence of blockchain with the current cost consultant drivers, which seem to be pioneering construction processes. And I'm wondering if anyone would like to give a forecast about how robotics might fit into this picture. Thank you.
Sure. So IBM is fundamentally involved with the Hyperledger project, which is not cryptocurrency, not fundamentally tokenized as per Bitcoin or Ethereum. It is a private permissioned blockchain which we build individually for each particular use case. So there's no coin, there's no proof of work, there's none of that stuff in Hyperledger. That said, there are publicly referenceable projects going on to join up with Ethereum, and there has been a partnership deal signed, and looking at things like a stable coin and so on as we move towards tokenization.
Arcadis has cost consultants, so I'll try the second section, and I'll bundle the robotics into it first. And I don't think robotics is the big change that we're going to see initially. I think it's actually moving to a much more component-based form of construction. So members of the audience may be familiar with some of the work that the IPA has been doing in platform-based design for manufacturing assembly, which is a very important government initiative which has been funded by the construction sector deal. What that's trying to do is to get the industry, rather like the automotive industry, to consolidate around using lots of interchangeable components to deliver different buildings. So let's say you can use the same components to deliver schools, hospitals, sort of residential property and such like. And what that starts to do is then, of course, you can start to attach lots of different attributes to those components, which might include cost. And you could then start to see that those components might then start to sit within a ledger. But I think that's quite a long way of an extension from where initially you want to actually get the industry to understand how components work. But going back to the fundamentals in my presentation, once you introduce process into the way that the industry operates, then you create the potential for things like blockchain to be introduced.
Yeah, I think the other big area for me in terms of AI and automation in construction is around supply chain management. And actually it's about, as we've said, rather than a big bang in construction, it's actually about automating a lot of the people-heavy, payment dispute-heavy, lawyer-heavy processes that you see as part of a construction project. So I think we will see, won't we, in the next 18 months to 2 years, much more use of automation in the broadest sense, whether it's off-site manufacturing, whether it's component-based manufacture, in terms of the supply chain, but also in terms of how people are paid, when people are paid, and the terms on which they're paid.
I think we know we have an issue in construction with regards to payment. We work on low margins. So anything that actually could come along and actually help streamline or make it a lot more efficient. I know we're all supposed to kind of set in contracts, as I mentioned, kind of at regular intervals to get paid, and things do happen. It's really, I think, to be honest, the first win really needs to be looking at how we can actually address the payment issues that we have in construction, and in terms of just kind of moving on to kind of in terms of sort of automation. I think I touched on, I don't know, about the intelligent contract I was talking about, where you would need something more than just a sort of a program that could run through, and you actually set the codes at the outset to deliver what you want at the end, knowing full well, having kind of shown sort of examples, that it really doesn't happen in our industry.
I think you should also get Matt's opinion on that one. Thank you.
I guess I'd probably agree with the panel, to be honest with you, Abel. I was sort of, I think the important thing, I think Simon's speaking, probably closest to my heart here around, we've got so much to sort out around processes before we can start to apply any clever blockchain technology to them. Interestingly, just coming back to the Construction Innovation Hub, Keith Waller was talking earlier today, so he said some stats around the inefficiencies of the build process. So apparently for every house that's built, every bit of material gets moved 4 times before it's installed into its permanent spot. And then up to 7 tons of waste is taken to landfill. So 7 tons is taken to a site unnecessarily and then taken and put into a sort of landfill or skip or something somewhere. So we need to make sure that when we start applying all these kinds of technologies, we're actually focused on doing things better rather than doing bad things in a better way as such.
Thank you.
I think the point about margins in the industry is really important. We saw a report recently that said that the average profit margin in the UK in the construction industry is 0.5%. It doesn't take much to go wrong on a project for that to turn into a negative number. So anything we can do to generate efficiency, speed up how people are paid, when people are paid, disputes around payment, I think will really help to put the sector on a more sustainable footing going forward.
I have very quickly the opportunity to come back on some of that. In terms of IBM, the speech that I caught was very exciting, and I, recognise it. The rest I didn't catch. Simon, I think that whilst I broadly agree with what your general thrust is, and a lot of it is common sense, that there are opportunities within the blockchain about what is not on the blockchain as well. So by absence of the blockchain, and if we just come back to the waste thing, is that I don't think, based on my limited experience of construction as an industry, I think that it is worth attending to the potential risk that we adopt the same principles of waste that currently occur within construction as applied to the new technology, so that actually there is much more opportunity in the micro than people would realise, and that there's disregard paid to the micro relatively to the big sums involved, and that as a consequence the detail can get lost in the overall umbrella of the picture. So there is opportunity in the blockchain about what is not on the blockchain. Conversely, if something has not been registered on the blockchain, it then becomes auditable in another sense. So if you return to Grenfell, if something does not appear on the... Do you see what I mean? That there is a conversely higher standard given the blockchain. So by virtue of the fact that it is not on the blockchain provides opportunity.
I think thank you for reinforcing a point, because I think that is the point. It's the small, simple things, of which there are very many multiples of, thousands, millions, where the value is, rather than the really big collective complex things. So thank you for making the point.
Comments on this? I think we can take one more question, perhaps. So there was a question about what is the token for the construction sector. Do you understand that blockchain doesn't need to be tokenized? Yeah? Do you want to ask questions about that? Or do you have any questions about how build information modeling might benefit from blockchain? I think one of the things we discussed before was intellectual property, or like we mentioned before, was intellectual property. Yeah.
As we've got two lawyers on the panel,
very good.
There's a question that I'm really interested in, which is there's the much maligned phrase smart contract. And I'm absolutely certain that when we say smart contract, we don't mean encoding JCT whatever. So I'd really like to ask our two lawyers on the panel, what do they think a smart contract should actually do and what it shouldn't?
Yes, very good, excellent question.
I think that the term smart contract is used too much in different contexts, and it's used to cover a range of different things. At Clyde Co, what we're doing through our Clyde Connected consultancy is automating parts of contracts. So we are automating independent certifier sign-off. We're automating payment on completion of practical completions, on sign-off of practical completion certificates. We are referring matters to arbitration or dispute resolution automatically once they've been through a certain process. I think Daria made a really interesting point, which is that what we're seeing at the moment is that very binary yes or no output. So X happens and Y is the consequence. You still need, to answer your question, a legal wrapper around the code. There still needs to be the legal terminology and the consequences spelt out in a contract that sits alongside that coded text. So we're not seeing a contract which doesn't exist in itself, if that makes sense. We're seeing automation of parts of or aspects of bigger projects. That will, of course, change over time.
I think as David is actually hands-on working on this, I have very little to add except the fact that I did mention that we need to question whether a smart contract, as David said, kind of a binary process, is suitable. And if it is, how do we break it down into smaller elements, which David's practice is doing at the moment, to actually try and get those sort of small, but still with human intervention. I think we have to remember that. We're not fully automated, and we'll probably never be. And that's where I said a more intelligent contract going forward will probably be something that's more suited for our industry than others, because it's, as I said, you start with A, but you don't sort of arrive at B, although you plan to do so. You end up at D, E, F, or even Z. So we do need to look at something that could allow us to maneuver and allow us to actually change, but it still execute that contract. Because you know, just because say you had a shortage of steel and certain type of work that needed to be done isn't done on site, is no one's fault. But there's a sort of human element that says, well, look, come, let's see what's been done, what needs to be paid, and because that is on the list of things that needed to be done for payment, and it's, you know, what do we do with it? So I think there's a long way to go. That, as I said, don't forget, you heard intelligent contract here.
I mean, just to finish off on that, I think I always say to clients, it's rubbish in, rubbish out. There's still a human component needed to validate. So the nodes in the blockchain, if that's us as individuals, the validation is only as good as the information that individual holds. And I think we are some way away, certainly in the construction industry, from seeing automation of those nodes and validation undertaken autonomously.
Okay, Tim seems to.
Sure. So I can add a little bit from our perspective on that. And I've heard it said that smart contracts are neither smart nor a contract. They are just executable code. And it's very, very similar to robotic process automation. It's just done in a slightly different way. And so at this point, it is doing simple things. And that's about as far as we need to go. There's plenty of value to be got just by doing that little piece.
Okay. So, Matt, do you want to say anything about intellectual property and blockchain? No, you're okay. So, you have another question? Okay, great. Okay.
So I'm just interested in the expert view. So we're obviously here in Future Build today. Future Build used to be Eco Build. You know, the big risk, or the rumor around obviously perhaps more Bitcoin, but also blockchain, and the amount of transactions and processes that we're going to be doing is the significant environmental impact that this might have on kind of on society. So probably more for you, Tim, and IBM, but I'd be interested in other people's view about, is this leading us down a non-sustainable path?
Are you referring to the proof of work, electrical demands and that kind of stuff? Yeah, so that is a cryptocurrency public blockchain type issue. That is not an issue for enterprise private permissioned blockchains who don't use that. You know, in business transactions, we need to know who we are transacting with. You can't do, it's illegal to do business with people you don't know who they are, right? So it is a very different way of using this technology. The core piece is still similar, the linked blocks, etc., forming the chain. But the way you get there, the way you execute it is slightly different. So for us, enterprise blockchain is absolutely real. It's more efficient than the current processes, and therefore it's got to be more sustainable.
I think the skills gap is the other half of it, actually, because yes, it's the mining of cryptocurrencies that takes up energy and typically fossil fuels to do that. But I think from an investment and R&D perspective, back to your broader point about resources, do companies, do construction, big players have the R&D budgets to be able to fund developments in this space? Are there other burning platforms at the moment? And are the skills in-house or out-house to be able to actually plug those gaps and do it in a sustainable way?
I think it's one area where I think this is really interesting in terms of some of the power of blockchain, because construction we keep going back, it's a very, very fragmented industry in terms of not only its participants but its stakeholders. And one of the really attractive things about cryptocurrency blockchain is its transparency and immutability, and the fact that it is distributed, and therefore an organisation or stakeholder doesn't have control. And I think that the model that Tim has advocated, which is effectively a corporate blockchain, is a little bit problematic around those use cases of end users in particular having visibility of what's been done to them. So I think the question is how do you blend those two things together? The transparency of permissionless with the economy and efficiency of permissioned. And I think getting that hybrid right is probably the key to the challenge that you've actually sort of highlighted there, which is for it to have real value to participants in the industry, access to that information needs to make a difference. And if it doesn't make a difference, i.e. if it doesn't change the way that organisations get paid, or if it doesn't make people feel safer in their homes, then there's not much point in doing it. So preserving those two things, transparency and ease of access, I think is going to be absolutely essential for blockchain to really take root in the industry.
So I'd probably cite the IBM Food Trust blockchain as a good example of consumer-facing blockchain delivering increased trust. One of the primary reasons why Walmart started to develop it was the ability to track and trace food in the case of contamination, and it gave them the ability to reduce the time taken to track food back through their supply chain from 7 days to 2 seconds. But it also gives the consumer increased confidence that they can access information about exactly where it comes from, but the consumer doesn't necessarily need to be an active participant on the blockchain to do that.
Okay.
You'd be glad to hear I probably don't have much more to add, but in terms of is it time to? Okay.
No, that's fine.
In terms of transparency within the construction context, I think that's actually, if we have that transparency, part of the problems we have is sort of the time it takes decision-making processes and not having enough information to make those sort of decisions. If those are actually real-lifely available, basically by all the participants in the industry, I think that transparency hopefully makes the decisions made quicker, and those decisions made quicker will actually, move on things that need to be at payment. And I'm really actually interested in getting that sort of hopefully first win blockchain and the confidence in the industry through sorting out our payment problem. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Well, yeah, thank you very much. I think we have a little bit of time. 4 minutes. Okay, so one more question. Give it to him.
Hi, just like to ask a question, probably more for IBM, and also there's a connection to payments, on the development of blockchain for distributed energy generation. So really what I'm thinking here is if you have a solar installation or a biogas installation or whatever, you have essentially a lot of meter readings which are being generated. Those meter readings there are lots of transactions that are coming from many, many different places. At the moment, payment terms on PPAs, etc., tend to be monthly, for instance, whereas actually a lot of the installations could use those payments sooner. Just trying to get a sense of where blockchain is in that distributed energy space.
Sure. So yeah, it's a really, really great use case, and you'll be pleased to know we're building one of those in Europe with a major energy supplier and retail customer facing.
Well, in terms of a university college, we are running hackathons and code sessions, and some of the PhD students in the Energy Institute, the UCL Energy Institute, started to develop an energy blockchain. They are calling it, it's quite interesting, they're calling it Hackney Chain, and this is to tokenize green energy within Hackney. They are looking at this use case, and we have some other use cases out there. I think there is a use case in Brooklyn, etc. But it is a very interesting, very promising area. I think the idea is to sell this energy back to the grid or sell it peer-to-peer as well. We don't advocate for any particular technology, but they've been working on this in something called Earth Recorder. and they're also investigating how to do this in Ethereum and Hyperledger. I'm collaborating a lot with Hyperledger to see how we can create a version, a translation of that blockchain in one of the Hyperledger projects. Okay, I think we are out of time. I want to thank all the speakers and the guests for taking the time to come over and present and discuss with us. And if you want information about the Construction Blockchain Consortium, I have some printed material here. I can give it to you. And there is also a newsletter that we send, so you can go to the website and subscribe. But I can give you all the links right now if you want. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Yeah.